Welcome to FFRF's live call-in show, Ask an Atheist. I'm Andrew Seidel, a constitutional attorney here at the Freedom from Religion Foundation.
And I'm Elizabeth Cavell, an associate counsel at FFRF.
And I'm Patrick Elliott, FFRF senior counsel.
Today's topic is government prayer. So while we briefly introduce why government should not have a prayer, but does, you can send in your comments or ask a question, whatever your views, via Facebook or Skype.
We want to hear from you, whether you're a believer or atheist or refuse to label yourself. Be sure to get those questions in, or you can call us on Skype using the Skype name on the screen.
At FFRF, we think the Constitution and law are pretty clear. Government officials should get off their knees and get to work. They're free to pray if they want, but they should do it on their own time and on their own dime, not on the taxpayers.
Last week, our friends at the ACLU had a solid victory over government prayer. As they put it in their press release, government prayer on steroids. That case was called Lund v. Rowan County, and FFRF submitted an amicus brief along with Americans United, the American Humanist Association, the Anti-Defamation League, and Center for Inquiry, and others.
And it was a big win. The entire Fourth Circuit, not just a 3-judge panel, decided that the prayers violated the Constitution. The county commissioners delivered prayers themselves and offered exclusively Christian prayers. The commissioners repeatedly proselytized, asking attendees to accept the Christian faith, but the court did not say that all prayers were prohibited. Actually, it was quite the opposite.
So how did we get here? How did we get to a place where courts are analyzing prayer practices and saying, these prayers cross the line, but these prayers are okay? To understand this, we actually have to go back to 1983, a Supreme Court decision called Marsh versus Chambers. Ernie Chambers, a Nebraska legislator, friend of FFRF, and a recipient of FFRF's coveted Emperor Has No Clothes Award, challenged the prayers a chaplain gave at the Nebraska legislature. In that case, the Supreme Court basically said that the drafters of the First Amendment allowed government prayer, so they couldn't have thought that prayer violated that amendment.
But this misses several important points. As FFRF pointed out to the Supreme Court in an amicus brief Andrew wrote in 2013, first off, it ignores every important legal analysis that courts are supposed to use to analyze state church cases. Instead, it basically says that prayer is a tradition and therefore it's fine. And this shows what James Madison pejoratively called a blind veneration for antiquity. Second, the opinion is also based on dubious history. Those same framers passed the Alien and Sedition Acts, which are uniformly condemned as violating the First Amendment. And if every government policy that existed at the framing of our Constitution were legitimate, we'd still be a segregated country.
The court's reliance on history was also problematic because it ignored other fairly important aspects of history. For instance, it ignored the legal opinion of James Madison, the father of the Bill of Rights and the father of the Constitution, who wrote that the establishment of the chaplainship to Congress is a palpable violation of equal rights as well as of constitutional principles. The brief that Liz mentioned before was in response to the Supreme Court's second big prayer case, which was handed down in 2014, Greece versus Galloway. And Galloway extended the legislative prayer exception to the First Amendment from some legislatures to also local government bodies. But that doesn't mean, as some people seem to think, that all government prayers are now okay. Prayers that denigrate non-believers or minorities are no good. Prayer practices that preach conversion are out. If the audience is young and susceptible to coercion, the prayers are still impermissible.
Prayers at school board meetings have also been struck down by the 6th and the 3rd Circuits. FFRF is litigating a case right now against the Chino Valley School Board in California over prayer, Bible readings, and proselytizing at board meetings. We already won that case at the district court level, including winning about $200,000 in legal fees, and the school district decided to appeal. So hopefully the 9th Circuit will soon join the 6th and the 3rd Circuits in deciding that government prayer is not okay. Now, another interesting caveat the Supreme Court tagged on to the government prayer decision in Greece is that prayers must be open to all, including us. The court wrote, quote, "The town at no point excluded or denied an opportunity to a would-be prayer giver. Its leaders maintain that a minister or layperson of any persuasion, including an atheist, could give the invocation." And
that principle of equality has led FFRF to 2 other lawsuits. First, along with the ACLU, Americans United, and our Florida chapter, we're suing Brevard County in Florida. Despite repeated requests from humanists and atheists to give the opening invocation in Brevard County, they refused because atheists and humanists, quote, do not share the county's beliefs or values, end quote, and the, quote, commission chooses to stand by the tradition of opening its meetings in a manner acknowledging the beliefs of a large segment of its constituents. That directly violates the equality principle that Greece laid out, so we sued.
We also used that principle to sue the U.S. House of Representatives on behalf of FFRF co-president Dan Barker. The House allows guest chaplains to deliver opening invocations, but they rejected Dan. First, they tried to say that Dan is not ordained, even though he is, and argued that he is no longer a minister of the gospel because he had announced his atheism publicly. Then they tried to argue that Dan's invocation will not be sufficient because it will not invoke a, quote, higher power, even though Dan planned on invoking the highest power over government, we the people. We have a video of Dan describing, in his own words, the case.
Hi, I'm Dan Barker. Did you know atheists have been banned from speaking before Congress? Each year, our government spends nearly $800,000 to open each session of Congress with a prayer. But even though a quarter of the country is non-religious, 96% of House prayers have been Christian. Shouldn't the House of Representatives be representative? My representative has asked the House chaplain, Pat Conroy, to allow me to be a guest chaplain. And Conroy has turned me down. That's why the Freedom from Religion Foundation is suing Congress to permit me to deliver an invocation on behalf of secular America. In the United States, there is no higher power than we the people. I want to invoke not a supernatural spirit, but the spirit of secular patriots, like Thomas Jefferson and Thomas Paine, who put common sense above dogma. It's time for the government to invite atheists, agnostics, skeptics, and secular humanists, not shun them. And it's time for non-believers to vote for candidates who will finally get religion out of government. You can help us win this lawsuit by joining the Freedom from Religion Foundation today at ffrf.org.
A few more interesting side notes on those congressional prayers. Congress actually spent $10 million on prayers from 2000 to 2016. The Senate chaplain has 3 staffers and a budget for salaries of more than $435,000 each year. The House chaplain has 2 staffers. That House chaplain, the man who discriminated against Dan because Dan is not religious, makes $172,500 a year to pray. That's it. That's his only duty, to deliver the opening prayer. And he only does it about 1/3 of the time. Guest chaplains give the other 2/3 of prayers. Another interesting side note, 99.8% of all prayers given during that window represented Abrahamic religions, even though those religions represent about less than 75% of the population. So, if this colossal waste of money, more than $2,000 per prayer, bothers you, go ahead and call your representative.
Calling your representative is a great way to help us end this wasteful spending, but if you want to earn some cash and an award and a trip to our annual convention, you can try your hand at activism, because the Supreme Court required equality in prayer policies even for us atheists. FFRF started the Nothing Fails Like Prayer contest to encourage non-believers to represent us at local meetings that already have a prayer. Winners deliver their invocation at the FFRF convention and have shared the stage with Lawrence Krauss, Daniel Dennett, Sean Carroll, Taslima Nasreen, Jerry Coyne, Susan Jacoby, and Ron Reagan.
And we thought we'd share one of the more colorful Nothing Fails Like Prayer winners. This entry is from Florida activist David Suher, Its satanic leanings caused quite a stir at the Pensacola City Council meeting, even though the words, other than the final two, are completely secular. It's amazing how upset the town got when it wasn't the majoritarian God being represented. If more local governments had to sit through prayers from faiths that aren't their own, or through non-religious invocations, or satanic invocations, we think there'd be a lot less government prayer.
Silence. Let us stand now, unbowed and unfettered by arcane doctrines, born of fearful minds in darkened times. Let us embrace the Luciferian impulse to eat of the tree of knowledge and dissipate our blissful and comforting delusions of old. Let us demand that individuals be judged for their concrete actions, not their fealty to arbitrary social norms and illusory categorizations. Let us reason our solutions with agnosticism in all things, holding fast only to that which is demonstrably true. Let us stand firm against any and all arbitrary authority that threatens the personal sovereignty of one or all. That which will not bend must break, and that which can be destroyed by truth should never be spared. Its demise, it is done. Hail, Satan.
And with that, we're going to take a few of your questions. Our first question comes from Twitter, and it is from Gregory Knight, who asks, how does the House, Senate, and every branch of the military get away with employing chaplains at taxpayer expense? So we mentioned at the beginning, I think, Pat, you had the James Madison quote about the fact that chaplains are a palpable violation of the Constitution, at least in Congress. He thought military chaplains were as well.
Right. I mean, one of the problems with the chaplains in the U.S. Congress is really there's not an immediate accommodation or need for them. With the military, for people stationed abroad or stationed on vessels, there's at least the argument that individual citizens would need some facilitation of their right to worship. So I think there is a distinction between chaplains for military and chaplains for Congress. We're seeing violations, I think, with this chaplains going overboard, where I think in New York City, the sanitation department has chaplains. I mean, there's no burden on religion that requires the city of New York to have sanitation chaplains. I mean, it's ridiculous the how that's being extended for what may or may not be constitutional in the first place in terms of the military chaplains.
So kind of the line that we're drawing here is if the government itself is burdening somebody's religion, then the government might be able to alleviate it by employing a chaplain. So if we're sending these soldiers abroad and to go to Iraq, they're going to find out it's going to be hard to find a church over there. So we might say, okay, in that case, the government can give you a chaplain. But for people in Congress, for people at local police departments and fire departments, doesn't seem to be a need, really. Does that seem to be the line?
Right, I think so.
Okay, so Tracy asks, do you think this phenomenon, government prayer, is occurring more because the churches are empty and the pious are sharing their dogma wherever possible?
I mean, I think, one of the issues that comes up, I think, is people are seeing the rise of secular Americans. For young people, about a third of them identify as non-religious. So I do think there is an aspect to wanting to portray the government as being religious and trying to kind of fight the tide that is people who are part of our society that aren't religious. So it's almost like they're using, there is some pushback on that idea that people are coming away from religion and they view it as bad, not in the same way that they'd view it bad as, oh, my neighbor's Jewish.
Sure.
I don't think I have to go out and convert him. But if you said, oh, my neighbor's non-religious, I've got to go tell him about Jesus, I think people think that one's more acceptable than the first example.
Right, although it's not necessarily clear whether or not this is happening more. Prayers in government, official government meetings is happening more than it was, 40 or 50 years ago, before a surge in secular Americans and demographics have changed so much. Or if we're just hearing about it more, or there's more controversy and conflict because of increasing pluralism. Our membership is increasing every year. The number of secular Americans is increasing exponentially, especially amongst millennials, as Pat mentioned. And the more people are comfortable identifying as atheist, agnostic, non-religious, or nothing in particular, the more people are going to be alienated, marginalized, and just plain ticked off by their government praying and engaging in religious activities.
It's kind of one of the perennial questions that we talk about, which is, are there actually more violations occurring of state-church separation, or are we just hearing about it more, either because FFRF is doing such a great job, or because the demographics are shifting so rapidly? What is really the driving force behind the, sharp increase in complaints we're seeing? And I think it's probably some combination of all those. And the other thing I think, too, just going back to the government prayer part of this, is that I always kind of think of this as Christians trying to sort of mark their territory. They're like dogs in a new neighborhood full of fire hydrants. They feel like they have to go around and mark, like, this is a part of my Christian government. Very frustrating for us, though. So our next question comes from Takare? I'm not sure if I'm getting that right. I'm really bad with the names on here. Why do presidents and witnesses have to swear on a Bible if separation of state and church exists?
Great question. So I will start by saying nobody has to swear on a Bible to take an oath that's required by the government. For example, a witness oath, or a jury oath, or even an oath to hold public office. There was a Supreme Court case, Torcaso, that is a long-standing case law that says that the government cannot force someone to swear a religious oath. And so even though it's frustrating because that case really only requires the government to offer a secular alternative to someone who objects to swearing a religious oath, it does not say that the default in practice cannot be to swear a religious oath. So that's frustrating to a lot of atheists and non-religious folks who object to a religious oath even being part of a government swearing in. But nobody has to swear a religious oath, including presidents, and we've asked every president in the past several elections to uphold the secular Constitution and not swear a religious oath. So far, no luck.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. The Constitution, Article 2 of the Constitution, lays out the presidential oath, and it ends, will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, period. There is no so help me God on there, and there is nothing about a Bible in there. That is just a holdover from, I think, like 8th or 9th century England. Not every president has done that. John Quincy Adams famously swore on a law book, which I think is a much better way to do it. Oh, and if we should say that if you are asked or told you have to swear on the Bible and have to say so help me God, that is absolutely not true. Contact FFRF, fill out the legal form on our website, and we will help you. You do not have to do that. Marshall Griffin asks, what's the line that makes it illegal for my congressperson to pray in public?
And I guess this is a good question because it kind of allows us to talk about the line, which is obviously people who are in office and people all over the country are religious, and that doesn't end because you've been elected to a position. So really the prohibition is abusing and using that position to promote your religion or to impose it on others. So really there's nothing wrong with a congressperson praying in public. We've had problems where congressmen hold official town hall meetings and they start imposing prayer on all of their constituents. I think that's where the line is crossed, is when this is an official part of participating in some event that the congressperson has organized. But overall, I guess it's easy to say a congressperson can pray in public, as they would wish.
Yeah, and they can go to church on Sundays, they can be Sunday school teachers. The line really is, are they using their official office? Are they using their official power? That power in that office that belong to we the people to promote their personal religion. And that's where it seems to be the problem, and we get complaints about it constantly.
We do, of course. So many elected officials either use or abuse their official capacity to pander, to sort of promote their personal religion, and it really just kind of perverts both the political office and the religion. And so it's an easy line. It's you can't promote religion in your official capacity. What you do in your private capacity is your own business. Should be simple, but still results in hundreds of complaints every year.
And so we have another question that kind of tags on to the end of this, and it's, what's the deal with prayer breakfasts? Alyssa Clinton asks. Why are those constitutional? And
can I just say, when I'm reading this, it seems like a Seinfeld question, like, what's the deal with, and you're still in, whatever. I mean, I guess the first answer I'd say is, they very well may not be constitutional depending on how they're being conducted. So we've seen city offices basically organizing and running these, which to me really strikes at the heart of the First Amendment. And the local government is putting on a religious function for people in the city or people in the county, and that really is a problem. It can be a little more of a gray area where the mayor or some local official happens to attend a prayer breakfast, in which case we look at what their involvement is and how they're promoting it. So oftentimes these are improperly called the mayor's prayer breakfast, and I think that's an improper use of the mayoral office to do that.
Yeah, so they can attend it again in their personal capacity, but once they're doing it as an official, then it becomes problematic. And FFRF has actually won a case like this in Denver a couple decades ago, before any of us were here, or even in law school. So the next question comes from Tessa Schneider. She says, can government officials promote religion on their social media? Can Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker tweet out Bible verses, or is that an endorsement of religion?
Well, we all know Governor Scott Walker can, and well, he does tweet out Bible verses and tweets out other religious tweets, and we see this as a burgeoning area of just problems in state-church separation. Obviously, the explosion of social media in the past decade has meant that this is a whole new frontier in what does it mean for the government to endorse religion, and how do official social media pages that belong to and are administered by government entities, how are those constrained? At FFRF, it's our view that official government social media pages are, they bear the stamp of approval of the government, and so they have to comply with the Establishment Clause. They can't promote religion. They can't proselytize, they can't favor particular religious sects or holy books over others. So we write more and more letters every year to government entities who promote religion on their social media pages, including school districts and law enforcement.
I'm getting a lot of sheriffs.
Yeah, law enforcement departments, school districts, and just cities and counties that have an official Facebook or Twitter account.
And it seems to be this is really a way that government is interacting with citizens now. It's one of the ways they're getting out information about events. Using this mode of communication it's almost becoming more mainstream than the other modes of government communication, right, which makes it even more important.
It seems almost more invasive too. We're used to reading cases where things are on display at the courthouse or on display in a public school. This is a means of communication from the government direct to thousands of citizens, immediately. And so the same legal principles apply. I mean, this idea of non-endorsement, this neutrality idea would apply to a social media account. We're aware of at least one case that was on this where the plaintiffs ultimately settled and prevailed. But I think, we're expecting there's going to be more cases. I think FFRF will be involved in cases because people have been pretty brazen about it. That doesn't make it right. It's just the law hasn't caught up to the technology in this instance.
Exactly.
Yep, and we were actually talking about a few of those possible cases at our last legal meeting. So Rick Hansen asks, this is a perennial question here. Why doesn't FFRF do anything about Muslims using our government to promote Sharia law and cramming their religion down our children's throat? So first, Rick, let me just say we've actually done a whole Ask an Atheist episode about this. If you are curious about why, go find it. I think it's titled, Why Doesn't FFRF Go After Muslims? So asked and answered, as we say in the legal profession. But what about that? What about Muslims using the government to cram Sharia law down their religion down children's throat? Anybody want to jump on that?
I think the first thing, just an understanding of the social dynamics of when somebody's violating the law, you typically have to be a majoritarian. It's very rare that you're seeing a city or government official who's in the minority, a very small minority religion in this country, abusing that position to promote something to the majority. So I think the reality is it's not happening as often, or it's in very niche areas that it might be happening. And if it were to happen, we would be involved. We have had some instances where there have been problems with maybe a particular coach at a football team in a heavily Somali and Muslim community where they've been going overboard, and we would correct that just as we would for the Christian coach. But oftentimes it's on a very small scale, and it's not as common. I don't know, Liz, you can maybe comment on how prevalent this is.
Right. The short answer to why don't we go after Muslim violations is we do, and the follow-up is that we don't see it as often because, there aren't as many Muslims in government positions as there are Christians, in other broader majority religions. So I will say, if you, Rick, know of a Muslim in a government position who is abusing their authority to promote Sharia law, please drop what you're doing, go to your computer, go to ffrf.org and report the violation. We will correct it.
So a little bit more of a real question from Twitter. Prolcat asks, it's tied to this, why are Christians fine if they get to rub Jesus all over everything? But what do they lose if they think Muslims or Satanists might get to pray? I think the point there is they're fine when it's their prayers, but then once other people start get to use those prayers, then they get all upset.
Yeah, sorry, this relates right to the topic of today's Ask an Atheist, which is government prayer, because nowhere else is this being sort of illustrated for those in the majority religion than in this area, where, yes, courts have said that this practice is okay and can comport with the Constitution as long as it's not excluding minority religions, including atheists, and then atheists are joining in, and people have a problem with it all of a sudden. A lot of Christians in David Suhor's community in Florida, who you saw giving the sort of ironic and farcical satanic invocation, you can bet that caused a stir and caused some Christian people in his community to think, hey, we don't want your prayers in our government all of a sudden.
I think they're right to the extent they're now in a position where people who've been in the minority have agreed and saying, hey, this is a government meeting, I shouldn't have to feel like I'm participating in this thing that I very much disagree with. So I think they're right to be bothered that these prayers are a part of government. It's just that if they're going to go down that road of including prayer, they may have to hear some prayers that they may not agree with, which is, I guess, what we all been doing all along.
Yeah, welcome to our world.
Quite right.
And that's the point we're trying to make with the Nothing Fails Like prayer contest, which everybody should go enter. We have a couple more questions that have been rolling in. I'm going to take this one right now since it's very prompt. How do you feel about Donald Trump tweeting at 12:21 today, so 10 minutes ago? In America, we don't worship government, we worship God, exclamation mark. I think that's all in caps. I mean, this is a common refrain for Trump. He's said this before. We actually did a New York Times ad correcting his mistake because we all know he reads the New York Times, the failing New York Times. And again, it's simply not true. The demographics in this country are shifting rapidly. As Patrick mentioned, 1/3 of millennials are non-religious. About 1/4 of Americans are non-religious. There are more atheists and agnostics than there are Hindus, Jews, Buddhists, and Muslims combined. So the times they are changing.
Right. I mean, I think the second part to that is we don't worship government. I think we celebrate a democratic, Republican form of government where we pick our leaders and we agree to civil law. We don't agree to religious law. I guess the other, caveat I'd say is that we worship God. I'm interested to know what are the characteristics of this God. I mean, this is a common refrain where people who are religious kind of pretend that they all believe the same things, but certainly their holy books are different and the requirements on how they're supposed to live are very different, but it's just kind of presumed that, we all believe in the same God. So I think I would say kind of along the Trump line, a troll type tweet that people celebrate, but when you start to look at what the words actually are, there's not a lot of real substance to that statement.
I think that could be said about a lot of things. So we have Jess Lowry on our page right now apparently is saying, I'll just quote here, "You pathetic sorry people, take yourselves to hell. If there weren't God, we wouldn't need coward atheists." Okay. "I hope God strikes you all down." Okay, God, if you're there, strike us down right now.
This is illustrative, though, of the larger, maybe, you've often pointed out, Andrew, the disdain for atheists. Like, why are they so disliked? Like, why are they one of the largest, most distrusted groups, on bottom with, what did you say, rapists? This is like they've done surveys to see what would you vote for an otherwise qualified candidate for office if they fit these criteria. Why are atheists so low? And I think part of it is because people who are religious take offense that we are comfortable in ourselves without the need for religion. And just firsthand, earlier this year, I was doing a debate against a priest in Minnesota, and the audience was very interested to know, like, how are you, almost like, how are you a moral person? Like, how do you know not to murder other people? It was like offensive to them that, as a former Catholic, that I could be okay without the religion. So I think this is like the person who's tweeting at us, why are they so bothered that we don't believe the same thing, is because we're comfortable with it.
I think it's actually too. I think the mere existence of atheism and atheists is a threat to religion. And it's what you're saying, but it's kind of flipped a little bit. The fact that we exist and we are happy people and we are satisfied people and life is great and this is the only life we have to seize it, that kind of shows up their belief system. And it also shows that you can live a great life without that belief system. And I think that point is just a threat to religion in general, and it's one of the reasons we're so widely libeled and slandered.
Yeah, and I mean, the work we do keeps the majoritarian religion out of government, and that's something that people in that majority don't like. And so, they consider that a personal attack on them and those who share their religious beliefs. And we just kind of say, hey, look, you can have your own personal religious beliefs. When you use government to promote those religious beliefs, we will check you and push back, and people don't like that, and they don't like us for doing it.
Yeah, the destruction of those unwarranted privileges always, the cry we always hear is persecution, when really it's just equality and constitutionality. So God, still waiting, strike me down whenever you're ready. I think we're about out of questions unless God wants to do that thing. No? Okay. So I think that'll do it for the questions. And I think probably if there's one thing that you should take away from today, let it be this: that when it comes to government prayer, you have a voice and you have to use it. You have to use it. In the 1970s, a young college student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, go Badgers, realized that her state school included a prayer at every commencement ceremony. She could have stayed quiet. She could have kept her mouth shut. That would have been the easy thing to do. She might have decided not to make those waves and just graduate with everyone else and endure the 2-minute telepathic phone call to the imaginary sky daddy. But she didn't. Instead, she went before the senior class board, who had no idea why this prayer tradition existed. They listened, and they agreed with her. Then she visited the chancellor, who also agreed with her. And after more than 120 years, the tradition of invocations, also known as imposing Christianity on everyone, ended at UW-Madison. That young lady is Annie Laurie Gaylor, who went on to help found the Freedom from Religion Foundation, which is us. We've been fighting for your rights for more than 40 years, carrying thousands of state church violations, all because she would not sit so silently by. So, you've got a voice, and you have to use it. You have a duty to use it. So thank you for joining us on this week's episode of FFRF's Ask an Atheist, and we'll be back with a new topic next week.